Well, today came the last delivery. We finally got our vacuum forming material for the vacuum forming press. A silicone sheet, a silicone rubber sheet that we'll be using in the construction of our own thermal press. I've seen a lot of videos on YouTube on building and constructing thermal presses for the express purpose of forming Kydex holsters for guns, knives, and various other components like RC cars, and it's limitless, the possibilities. But we're going to specifically today work on the press, the thermal press advertises and you see on YouTube, and their various components. There's a lot of manufacturers out there that make presses, and you can get a press for $500, $600, $700, and they're more than adequate. They do an excellent job. And I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I just find it interesting that if you have the ability to do something and maybe improve on it in the process, we do that. And one of the things we're going to do today is, instead of using plywood or two pieces of wood, however it's described in their plans, is to engage in a little bit more complicated process. And everything can be done with basic woodworking tools. You don't have to have what I have here. You can do this with a hand router. You don't need a router table. You don't need a table saw. Those are all conveniences in the manufacturing process that we're going to avail ourselves of today. Some of the machining is going to be a little bit complicated, but I'm going to try to make it as simple and easy as possible. We're going to make a jig so we can cut our solid piece of 22 by 18 or 26 by 18, leaving us a rough opening 16 by 20 in that ballpark area, and maybe make some adjustments as we go along. Hinge the pieces together and then do the appropriate plumbing, and we're going to use PEX for the plumbing. I'm a PEX fan. I'm not much of a fan of PVC or other forms of tubular plastics, because every time you get involved in gluing something, you just can't remember whether you made that quarter turn or not. So with that, let's get started. Just to clarify, what we want to do is, this is going to be basically our sheet stock, and what we want to do is cut out this area both from our melamine and from our HDPE. This is going to get wasted, and we're going to do this on the router table. First thing we're going to do is we're going to cut this to 18 inches wide, all three pieces, and then we're going to use a sliding table to square everything up. Okay, we now have our three primary components for the table. We have the top, we have the bottom, and we have the piece of melamine that sits in the middle. So now what we need to do is we need to make our jig so that we can cut out our 2-inch border, and then we can mount this to this, and this becomes our table. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually make a jig and then use our router over here to cut the pieces out, and hopefully have a really nice usable piece, and to also use the middle of this as kind of a vacuum forming plate. And you'll see a little bit more when we get there. So we built this quick jig so that we can have a center line, the edges of the 22-inch side, and the edges of the 26-inch side. This jig is going to be fastened to the rip fence on my table saw, and it'll allow us to take a piece of wood and cut this out. Now we're going to cut our long sections, we're going to cut our short sections first. Like this, over the end mill. And then we're going to take off our pieces right here so we can cut the long sections. And that will take us all the way to this stop right here. So for the short sections, we're going to use this stop. Just for purposes of dimensioning, it's real simple. All I did was took a 22 by 26 blank and centered it, marked it, and from that point forward I calculated out 14 inches less the end mill, and then 14 inches to the other side less than the end mill, and then 22 inches for the long stop less the end mill. So let's get started. I'll get this thing strapped to the T-square, and let's see how this works out. Okay, now having attached the template to the T-square fence, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we first of all we're centered, which we are right here. You can see that. And our center line is maybe a 32nd either way, but that's close enough. When we finish out, you'll never notice the difference. It doesn't have to be very accurate, it just has to be relative. The 2-inch dimensions for the frame are a recommendation. You can make them 3, 1.5 inches, depending on your fastening and the rigidity that you desire from your vacuum table. Then the other dimension that we're concerned about is this one right here, the distance. I've cut this blank, it's a 2-inch piece, and we're going to simply adjust our fence to get it just a little bit closer. Being very careful not to touch the end mill, because this little 1/8 inch end mill will pop off like that. And we're about a 32nd of an inch away. And just one more attachment. And we're just a little bit too tight. And we're good enough here. This will give us good play, the ability to stay up against the fence, and to feed this in roughly 3/16 inch increments. The melamine is a little bit more critical than the HDPE is. Okay, right there's our start. Okay, just a quick word about the materials we're going to be using. This is 8-ply plywood. You can get it at Home Depot, Lowe's, no matter where you go, you can get this stuff. It's pretty straightforward. It's an 8-ply. It's practically void free. It's cabinet or shop grade, really. And it costs somewhere around $45 a sheet. You'll have plenty of uses for it afterwards with the leftover pieces. We just cut this one out, and this is the one we actually drew our template from, which we have right here attached to our fence. For the top of our little thermal press, we're going to use melamine, and melamine is a man-made product. Sawdust glue and then a Formica-like surface finish on it. Again, relatively inexpensive. It's about $20 a sheet at Home Depot for a 4x8 sheet. And we're going to cut this out and leave our 2-inch frame right here. And for the bottom of our table, and give it a little bit of heft, we're going to use HDPE, high density polyethylene plastic. There's several places you can get it from. I got this from Curbel, curbel.com, I believe, and these were remnants that were cut to size, and I got several of these. I got these in 3/4 inch, 1.5 inch, and 2-inch thick. We're going to use the 1.5 inch to make our mold so we can curve our Kydex holster and also hold our gun. That'll be in another video. But these are basically the products that we're going to use to build this table today. The important thing here is that you take your time. There is no hurry in getting this accomplished. Plus, you only want to feed this like 3/16 of an inch at a time. But it'll leave a really nice finish. Plus, this material is relatively expensive, and you really don't want to screw it up. So just take your time when you're cutting it. Now, what you can also do is, you don't have to do it the way I'm doing it. You can make yourself, as you saw earlier, the template that I made, that I used to make this particular jig, and you can actually pattern route this out as well. When it comes to big pieces like this, I generally tend to like to work on this table here. So let's get started. Okay, let's go finish off our cuts. And do the same over here. And what I've done is, I've already measured this out, and this actually comes out to 3/4 inch offset for drilling the holes. And this will hold our centerpiece in place while we finish off cutting through the board. Otherwise, we'd be bouncing around pretty good. So, let's continue with the finished cuts. Okay, that pretty much takes care of it. Oh, a few more turns down, and there we are. And there we have our 2x2 frame. That's what we have.